We're rolling here in beautiful Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Brian, how's it going?
Doing well. Glad you guys came over to my side of the world for a change.
Yeah, we've been here. This
Welcome
is
to PA.
beautiful PA Wild. You're born and raised in Pennsylvania, right?
Yes, sir.
Do you ever wish you were born in a different state? And I'm asking more so on
sometimes, but looking back, it was a great place to grow up.
When you're growing up, what did you enjoy in terms of, because there's a lot of opportunities here and there's a lot of ground. There's a lot of big tracts of timber. I think that's maybe sometimes overlooked or not identified enough how cool it is.
Yeah, for sure. I come from a pretty blue collar family, so public land was important to us growing up. Fishing, hunting. My dad would take us to tons of public places, and we lived in the suburbs of Pittsburgh, so we had lots of public land close to us within half an hour, 45 minutes. So that was real important to our family because we didn't know many people with farms or property or anything like that. But like you said, lots of opportunities for deer, turkeys, bear, any type of fishing you want to do, small game, squirrels everywhere. Pheasants back then were a lot better. Grouse was a lot better back then.
What is Pennsylvania like today versus what it was like growing up? Is it better or worse in your opinion for whitetails?
It's better. Yeah, we started antler point restrictions about 20 years ago, and that's helped tremendously. We used to have to go up north. Everybody had deer camps up in northern Pennsylvania because there weren't a lot of deer down around the suburbs, but now they've moved down over the last 30 years. And, like we were just talking with Chris here, who's with me, my neighbor, we've had some giants right in our yards now in the suburbs. So lots changed with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so before we get too far into this, you've been on the podcast here a handful of times. You've been on Land Podcasts, and we've obviously worked with the Habitat Podcast for a long time. So go ahead and introduce yourself for people who maybe don't recognize the voice.
Sure. Brian Halbleib. Like Jake said, I'm from Pennsylvania. Live on the west side near Pittsburgh. I work in the suburbs. Been a police officer for 30 years, and got a couple of kids, 2 daughters that are, one's in college, one's going to be starting college. And I'm with the Habitat Podcast. If anybody hasn't listened to that, if you have, then you know a little bit about me.
Yeah, it's funny. One time, my dad does not listen to a lot of podcasts and not very tech savvy. He's like, "Have you heard of the Habitat Podcast?" It's like, "Man, yeah, I have." It was just so funny that he latched on to what you guys produce. So
that's great.
Yeah, it's really cool. Now, speaking of Pennsylvania, this is an interesting topic in itself. But in your opinion, do you think Sunday hunting should be open in Pennsylvania?
Absolutely.
Why is that?
Well, it would give more opportunities for everybody. In this fast-paced world we're living in, most of my friends have kids that play sports on Saturdays. A lot of people are working 6 days a week now. There's just a big opportunity there to get more people involved. I mean, we're losing hunters too quickly nowadays, and I think that would help license sales, which would put more money into the game commission, which would help buy more land and provide more opportunities. So I think it's great. I'm glad to see it moving forward. Finally, we've got a couple of Sundays, but they need to make it permanent for all Sundays.
Do you know if there's any other states that have anything similar to this?
There are, I think, 2 or 3 left, if I remember correctly. And they're all northeastern states, as far as I remember. It's all the old blue laws that are still hanging on in the New England states and just not going away.
You have to excuse my ignorance on this, but why was it in place to begin with? It had to do with church?
Yeah, that's my understanding. Like, even up until recent history, we couldn't buy liquor from anywhere or beer from anywhere but like a designated beer distributor. Whereas I'm 20 minutes from the Ohio border, I could go in any gas station in Ohio and buy a beer. You couldn't do that in Pennsylvania up until a couple years ago. So it's just part of that old blue law, probably based in the church rules and things from back in the day.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I just Googled it here. Maine, Massachusetts completely prohibit hunting on Sundays. Connecticut, Delaware, Maryland, New Jersey, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania allow only on some Sundays. It's interesting, though, because I personally only hear it about Pennsylvania.
Sure.
I don't really hear it much from the other states.
Yeah, I think it's so prevalent because we've been trying to change it. So Pennsylvanians have been very vocal about it in the last handful of years, so that's probably why.
What's the opposition of why it hasn't? I wonder. Like, I just don't understand it.
If you ever happen to come across a social media post about Sunday hunting in Pennsylvania, read the comments. I mean, you will get a chuckle out of it. There's people that are like, well, we sight our guns in on Saturdays and we watch football on Sundays. We don't want the opening day to change from Monday to Saturday or Monday to Sunday, or to bring more Sundays in because we have these traditions. And it's like, well, you can still do that.
Yeah.
and then the argument is, well, then they'll be shooting our deer on Sundays when we're watching football. Well, then, I don't know what the answer is to that.
Yeah. I don't. I think that Sundays. Do you think it'll happen in the next 5 years?
I don't know. I mean, we're moving in the right direction, so I think eventually it's going to become all Sundays. But getting back to the excuses, you hear everything from the deer need a rest. Like, from what? What? Because one day a week you're not harassing them, it's going to make a difference. Other people say it's the Farm Bureau that's fighting it because they don't want people coming on their land on Sundays, which, if any of the arguments were to hold up, I guess I can understand that point to a degree. But still, you could, if you're giving permission to people to hunt your property, you could say, please don't come on Sundays.
Yeah, I mean, that seems pretty straightforward.
Sure. So I don't see any of the arguments making sense, but there's people that'll disagree with me.
Yeah, so if you're outside of those states and you can go hunt on Sunday, enjoy it.
Sure.
So talk a little bit about this past season. I know you went to Wyoming, obviously hunted Ohio, Pennsylvania. How was your Wyoming trip?
It was a beautiful sightseeing trip. No, we had plenty of opportunities. My friend Chris Hamberry and my friend Brian Fichter, we drove out for the opener so we could try to catch a velvet buck, which we saw a few bucks that still had velvet. It was probably 50-50, maybe a little more skewed to the more bucks that had shed their velvet already, but we saw a few, but very successful sitting over water holes. I mean, it was nothing to see 100 deer a day.
Wow.
There with that open country.
Yeah.
And just waiting for the right buck to come in. And we had some opportunities. It just didn't pan out.
Yeah. Was that the first time you've been to Wyoming?
No.
So how many times have you been out there?
I've been to Wyoming a handful of times, but I've hunted it. I think that's my second or third time hunting Wyoming. That was the first time for whitetails.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. And when was the opening for that? The date?
September 1st. They start on September 1st, no matter if it's a Wednesday or a Saturday.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And so that's just a hot time of year. And I think
Sure
obviously was there a lot of general pressure too for that opening?
Not where we were. There's mostly private. There was a couple of blocks of public that surrounded us, but most of them were landlocked. So we didn't see a lot of people or a lot of cars in those landlocked public areas. But yeah, I mean, the deer, they're behaving in their summer patterns and didn't seem too affected by anybody yet.
Okay. So then how was Pennsylvania and Ohio? I know you're shooting the new MMTs.
Oh, yeah.
You knocked down some does?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, knocked down a bunch of does. I actually shot a doe in Illinois, too, because when I went to Illinois, I had a buck tag and a doe tag. The landowner said, if you could shoot a doe for me, I'd appreciate it. Absolutely. Yeah, knocked that doe down with the MMT and got two more in Pennsylvania.
Nice. So like I said before, I'm gonna consider this a little bit rapid fire.
Okay.
So we're gonna go through a handful of different things. One of them, how many cell cameras do you currently use?
I think I'm north of 30.
North of 30?
Yeah.
What's that been like? Obviously, that's a lot of data.
It is. Yeah, absolutely. I'd say probably a third of them are cell cameras, which helps tremendously. And the rest are older versions. Got to go out and check the cards and things. Yeah. So I try to be real strategic with the cell cams, where places that I don't want to be going into. And it helps tremendously with the solar panels that you guys have. They last a long time. I don't have to go in there. Keep the data coming all season. So yeah, it's just, trying to manage where I went to cell cameras to where I went to regular ones.
Mm-hmm. Has that strategy shifted over the last couple of years as you've, I assume, got more cell cameras?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Are you more aggressive with them, or more? Are you just replacing more of the non-cell cameras to have more current information?
Yeah. I'm just as I'm going through the years, I have a budget of what I can spend on trail cameras or whatever per year, and I try to add more as some get stolen or quit working.
So in a perfect world, you could have unlimited cell cameras. How many would you have?
Man.
Because there's a point where there's diminishing returns.
There is, yeah. I don't think I could handle more than maybe another 10 more, maybe 40 or 50 would probably be my max.
Yeah.
That'd be a lot of work.
Oh, yeah. Especially even with regardless, with cell cameras, taking the SD card out at the end of the year and still organizing the data for next year and building out those folders. The end of the year when you have 40 SD cards and you have to go through all of them and organize them.
Right.
That's an undertaking. It's fun. It's a fun one.
Sure.
But nonetheless, it's a lot.
Absolutely.
Do you go through and sort through your trail camera information to look back on previous years, or do you have any strategy with that?
Yeah. So anything significant with mature buck daytime movement, I'll note that. Try to keep track of that year to year, and I'll go back to that if I know that deer's still in the area. Things like that.
Mm-hmm. Have you? What have you picked up from that over the years? Because we talk about all the time with just annual data and how sometimes it could be really impactful, sometimes it doesn't line up. But have you seen some of those same things over the years?
Sure. Yeah, I'd say more often than not. I won't say it happens all the time, but more often than not, that historical data, if that buck's still alive, he's usually going to be using the same core area at the same times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. What's a mistake that you personally make with your trail cameras that you think you need to rectify?
I probably rely on them too much.
Uh-huh.
Like if I feel like, especially some of my leases that are further away, it's like if I'm going to invest the time of driving there and hunting and everything that goes along with all that, taking time away from the family, I think I put too much emphasis on, well, heck, I haven't seen a buck on that camera in a couple of days. So
yeah,
maybe I should go somewhere else. But knowing that they're there and knowing that, whatever square footage of
45
area,
degrees.
Right. I got to let go of that a little bit. I think I've relied on them too much at some times.
Uh-huh. So what does that look like then? Does that mean going to those leases when you don't have pictures? I mean, what would provoke a trip then? So let's say you haven't had the pictures that you think you should. What would provoke a trip?
I think if you know that he's still in the area, you may have not seen him for a few days or whatever, but if you know that buck's still alive and the time's right, the time of the season's right, and the weather's right, I think you should just take a chance and go and do it. I mean, we did it for years before we had cell cameras, and it's like all of a sudden now you start using that crutch a little too much.
It's easy to do. I guarantee everyone that has run cameras or cell cameras in general have said exactly what you said. Well, he hasn't been on camera, so I'm not going in there. But I mean, that's just we're all trying to optimize our time. We're all trying to be the most efficient. And to your point, maybe there's diminishing returns with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then also too, I mean, I'm sure you've seen it and everyone else has a ton of times where you have a cell camera or multiple camera locations and then they're not necessarily walking in front of the camera or, I mean, for instance, some of my better hunts this year, the cell cameras were dead, but they were in there.
Sure.
It's not walking in front of the camera. And obviously during the rut, movement's a little bit more unpredictable than early season or late season when they're a little bit, I don't want to say docile, but more predictable.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Have you seen that as well over the years?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. In fact, my lease partner, Dave, killed our number one buck on this last lease. We knew that buck, we knew where his core area was. And I think we had 3 cameras kind of like triangulating his core area, but we wouldn't get pictures of him all the time, but we knew he was staying there. So Dave just happened to take a shot, didn't say, oh, we haven't had him on camera. And he went down there one day and killed him. Mm-hmm. Just happened to come in and he shot him in a spot where we didn't have a camera, but it was still within that core area where we knew he was hanging out. So, to your point, you got to
sometimes you just got to follow your gut.
You got to do it. Yeah.
As simple as that is. And I think that's something that develops over time. And also, I think that's something that develops throughout the season when you're out there and have more observation to where you can rely on a gut feeling, in my opinion.
Sure.
And I assume that comes with multiple decades of experience too, where you kind of hone those instincts, which I think there's no shortcut to that. Or maybe I'm sure there's people that are naturally better at that than others.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah. All right, here, a little controversial. Do you think crossbows should be legal in archery season? In what capacity too? This is a hot button issue, and I'm not trying to upset anyone.
Sure.
But I think it's in the forefront of it's on the forefront of my mind. I feel that, I'm not trying to be negative, but I feel the sport of whitetails is potentially declining. Like the age class, I think, is probably going in a different direction than what it was a couple of years ago. And I think it's with some of the tools that are available now.
Sure.
So what's your opinion?
Yeah, so, I mean, that's a tricky one because just like Sunday hunting in Pennsylvania, crossbows weren't always legal in PA. That's a recent change. So growing up, the archery seasons were set because they were more challenging. So you had more opportunity. You had a longer season because it was more difficult to kill a deer with a bow. So I think that part of it kind of rubs people the wrong way, that it's not as difficult, which people make the arguments with the new compounds and wrist releases and everything. Okay, I mean, I'll give anybody that argument. But just to make a point, that's one side of it. Another side of it was the way that they came into Pennsylvania. It wasn't like hunters in Pennsylvania said, hey, we'd like to have crossbows. It was all the money from the manufacturers trying to get them into the archery season. And that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. Me personally, I don't hunt with a crossbow. I may someday. I don't know. I can't say today that I don't think they belong. In the past, with the traditions, the way Pennsylvania was, it didn't make sense to me the way that they came onto the stage, but they're here now and more people are getting involved. Kids are hunting earlier and staying with the sport longer. Older people are staying in the sport longer. So that's all good. I try to focus on the good no matter what the subject is. So it's a tough call. I mean, when I listen to people's arguments on either side, I can see both sides of it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a reasonable way to look at it. I think in a perfect blue sky situation, and this is just my opinion, I think it'd be interesting to see a shorter, like a crossbow season.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's a week, maybe it's a weekend before firearm season, weekend after firearm season. And obviously that's different throughout the state.
And it is starting to affect the harvest numbers of bow seasons.
Yeah.
And that concerns me and other bow hunters because you start to wonder, is my season going to get shortened because crossbows are upping the kill ratio?
Yeah. It's really interesting to me. And I think that I 100% agree with kids and in those scenarios, but I just, I feel like how you have like the guys that shot trad bows and were just super anti compound bow.
Right.
I feel like that is repeating once again.
Yeah. There's a lot of similarities there.
Yeah. And it's going to happen regardless, but, we can sit here and talk about it, but we're not going to change anything. So, we can at least share our opinion and provoke some thoughts.
Right.
Speaking of just in terms of ethics and legality and things of that nature, there's been a lot of attention on the ethics and legality of cell cameras. Obviously, we're a trail camera manufacturer. That's how we stay in business. I think they're a really cool tool, but I want to get your opinion on it.
Yeah, I don't think that they need to be restricted in any way. Now, some of these live ones that are starting to come onto the market where you could push a button and have a video and somebody run out their backyard and kill one, that's getting a little bit sketchy for me.
Uh-huh.
But the way that we're using them now, the way that it's an instantaneous picture or video, but it depends on the situation. Most of my friends, and I'm fortunate to be in the position like you guys, you know a lot of people that are hunting, and you talk to a lot of people that are using cell cams. In some instances, people are having more success killing bucks, but I don't think it's like something that it's just totally changed where, they're going to have to stop because the numbers are getting too high of the harvest. I don't think it's affecting it to that point. I'm a great example. I haven't filled a buck tag in a couple of years. So,
you need more
and I've got 30 cameras out. So
yeah, I mean, that's fair. I think for me personally, I think it increased general opportunities or encounters and also increased efficiency, in my opinion. Or yeah, I feel pretty confident in that.
Sure.
But I'm not hanging them over beds, and a lot of it's just they're fun to run.
Right.
I mean, what's the first thing? It used to be like, what is the first thing you check when you wake up? For me, it's what are my Exodus cameras doing? And so it's fun to know what's going on.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. We're burning through some here. We've talked to a ton of different people about the moon, and everyone has varying opinions on that. And it's really interesting to me because there's people from both schools of camp, and they both kill big deer. Like there's people that believe in it heavily. There's people that think it's nothing. They both kill big deer. They're both really efficient. Where do you fall? Do you pay attention to it whatsoever?
A little bit.
Okay, so what do you look at?
A little bit. I don't let it decide when I'm going to hunt. I think if you have the opportunity to get out there, most people that are working full time have families and things. If you wait around for a perfect moon phase, you're probably not going to hunt very often. Mm-hmm. in situations like ours. But I think, the moon has so much effect on our planet with tides and different things. It has to have an effect on creatures. I mean, being a police officer for 30 years, I've seen it affect humans with a full moon. People get crazy. I mean, it's documented. So I think it does play some role, but I don't follow it to a strict T when I'm planning my hunts.
Mm-hmm. So what have you seen in your line of work with moon phases? There's people a little bit more crazy.
Yeah, on full moons, it's been documented. I can't remember which law enforcement agency did the numbers. I'd have to look it up. But they found that on full moons that people's behavior becomes a little more agitated, I guess would be a good word, or elevated.
I just Googled it. Oh, man, it's like a research paper.
Yeah.
Yeah. It looks like Virginia, I believe, did it.
So if it's affecting tides and people, it's got to be affecting deer and game.
Yeah, general wildlife. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I go back and forth on it, and I don't pay enough attention to it. I just don't. But I could see when people have success on it, it's definitely worth hearing people's general opinion. Right. Now, this past another thing or general consensus is obviously the rut and the weather, and it kind of falls into the moon. Do you think the first week of November this past season was very warm? Mm-hmm. Do you think that weather truly inhibits the rut?
I think it affects them. I think especially if we had a pretty cold stretch in October, and I think those deer are getting their winter coats on. And when you get those warm stretches, I've noticed that they don't move as much when it's warmer. Mm-hmm. Me personally. And I've heard that from other people too. So I think it does hinder it, but they're still breeding somewhere.
Yeah.
So that's the old adage. You got to get out there and find out where they're breeding and try to get them as close to daylight as you can.
Uh-huh. It's been fun because I obviously spent a lot of time in the woods in November, and coming out to the show, a lot of people talking like, how was your season? And, like the first however many days was really rough. And then that cold front that rolled in across the country around the 10th, 11th, 12th. And across the board, it's just as soon as that rolled in, it seemed like activity across the entire country increased. Right. People's success was reflected to that. But it's weird too, because I haven't hunted as many ruts as you have, but even 2020 was very warm. Mm-hmm. 2022 was very warm. Before that, I want to say like the last really warm one was probably 2015 or 16.
Okay.
And I hope that's not a tendency that keeps coming along here.
For sure.
I was reading an article about, so this last year was one of the hottest documented years of Earth that we have, for whatever that is. And they anticipate that to be this upcoming year as well. And I'm just thinking, well, how did the deer feed? And the clover was extremely hot for a really long part of the season. And I think it's because we didn't have any of those hard frosts. And it didn't last very long too, so that could pop back. So with something like that, would that change how you would implement food plot strategies for this year? If you knew the weather was going to be a mirror image of what it was this past year, would it change what you do this year?
That's a good point. Yeah, that's not something I've given a lot of thought to, but that's why we preach diversity. So if you have something like clover in your mix out there, or if you plant it by itself, as long as you're diversified, if something's not on, like let's say you get a cold snap in October and they start hitting the brassicas and then it warms back up and they're on the clover. So you're in the chips as long as you've got some clover somewhere for them to go to, or alfalfa. I've seen alfalfa in these warmer years, deer use it up into the rut.
Yeah.
So it's just, that's what we always preach. Be as diverse as you can. That way, no matter what type conditions of weather or conditions, they're going to be eating something on your property or on your lease or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Even what are your thoughts on beans versus corn? The last couple of years in Illinois, it has not gotten cold enough to where beans have been a superior late season magnet in my experience.
Yeah. I think if you have the means to incorporate it, because let's face it, especially with corn, it's expensive.
Yeah.
To plant and maintain and fertilize. But if you have the means, absolutely. Keep it in your diversified plots. It's just another tool in your toolbox that you can rely on. If you do get a nasty late season, they will come in and eat those.
But you only have room for one. So you have to pick beans or corn.
Corn.
What? No hesitation on that.
I go corn.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I'm in agreement.
Yep.
Why is that? Just to add a layer of clarity.
I don't know what it is about corn. I mean, from paying attention to any type of hunting media, you put a bag of corn out for inventory at the beginning of the year. You've got most of the deer in that area coming to that pile. It's just, they've just something in their DNA from evolution that they're just drawn to that corn all the time.
Yeah, I totally agree. But the beans have been kind of a, like, what's the phrase? Like the magical bean. Like soybeans have been the magical bean. And to me, obviously, when it's really cold, it's extremely powerful. But
yeah, absolutely.
But you just look at how attractive corn is for how long throughout the season. So, what about when hunting mash trees? We're talking soybeans or corn. So now what about white oaks or crab apples? In your experience, I know that's, I'll just get your thoughts on it.
White oaks. I mean, when they're on the ground, there's nothing else the deer are going to go to as far as my experience watching them. I mean, they'll eat apples all the time because they're candy for them, but they're not going to let any white oaks go because they're there for a short time and they're gone just as fast as they're falling. So,
when have you seen white oaks be? Because obviously they're dropping at a similar time every year, I would assume. So, when have you seen them be some of the most productive over the years, just so people can make a mental note of, like, I really need to be keen in on this?
Yeah, it's early. I mean, if you've got some, like, a lot of states don't open until October, they're starting to get cleaned up in Western Pennsylvania and Eastern Ohio. That last couple of weeks of September, first couple of weeks of October. So it's quick. They drop early and they're gone fast.
When you say fast, do you think it's a 2 to 3 day window a lot of times? For one area.
I've seen it as short as that. Sure.
Yeah. How do you,
unless it's like a super bumper crop where the animals can't keep up with them, but that's, few and far between.
What is, man, that's an interesting time of year to hunt. And obviously it is a very powerful food source. In your mind, what's some of the best strategies to try to set up on white acorns dropping in the earlier part of the year to try to kill mature buck?
So if you're fortunate to have a huge white oak somewhere that's kind of by itself, that's great. If you can scout that out and learn that prior, you're going to have every deer just like a pile of corn. If it's the only big giant white oak dropping acorns within, few hundred acres, they're all going to be there at some point. So, figure out your access, put a camera on the access and the funnels, the corridors where the deer are using it, and try to come up with a plan for that tree, because they'll be on it for a few days.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's with, have you had much experience or have you had much success with that? I've struggled with that personally.
Sure, because normally you're not just going to have one dropping in one spot.
Right.
You're going to have one here, maybe 50 acres over this way, you'll have one. So it's kind of a crapshoot. Are they going to walk to this one today or walk to that one? So
we were talking about broadheads before we started recording. Are you a fixed or mechanical guy?
Fixed.
Why is that? Has it always been that way?
No, I've tried some mechanicals over the years, and I've actually had fairly good luck with them. But what I found myself doing with mechanicals, I don't want this to come out the wrong way. Not that I would take poorer shots with fixed blades, but with mechanicals, I was like sometimes I would miss opportunities for shots because I was waiting for that perfect broadside. I don't want anything to go wrong. But shooting a fixed head, I'm like, okay, they're not perfectly broadside. They might be quartering a little bit too, but I'm confident in the weight of my arrow, the strength of the fixed blade. I'm going to take this shot. If that makes sense.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. What else has evolved in your archery, I guess, equipment over the years too? You switched to the MMTs.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, MMTs, afflictors, the K2 fixed. Been very successful with those the last couple of years. Just trying to, I'm not one of those guys that buys a new bow every year, but every few years I try to get, if there's a technology advancement that warrants
a purchase
that'll help me be a better archer and a better shot, then I'm likely to invest in that. And I've upgraded sights. I try to get, sights that are more user friendly and help me get just a little tighter groups, just anything I can do to get an edge to just be a better shooter.
Yeah. Like I said, we're jumping around here quite a bit in terms of the this or that's all day sits, morning sits, evening sits. You can only pick one.
Evenings.
Why is that?
I'm not a morning person.
No.
I'll do all day sits if I have to, but there's nothing like going out there at 1 or 2 o'clock and having one on the ground by 4 and having all evening just to, get it home and get your friends over to the garage and crack a couple of beers. And that's the way to do it. If I had to pick one, it'd be evenings.
I'm the exact opposite. I love morning hunts more than it. Like, I don't know. I just love morning hunts personally.
Yeah.
Because I feel like the anticipation builds, like right when it gets light out. Yeah. I've just had a lot of good morning hunts over the years. Okay. 130-inch 6-year-old or a 116-inch 3-year-old. What are you taking? That's a good one.
I'd take the 160 3-year-old.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'd take the 130.
Yep.
I would.
Now,
I'm dead serious.
Now, if we're talking in a situation where if I passed that deer and it had a reasonable expectation to possibly survive, that'd be a different story.
Yeah.
But just rapid fire, quick answer, 160. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm picturing a super heavy 130-inch deer, not just a straight 130-inch 10. He's got to have like 5-inch bases in short times. That's my preference.
Sure.
In this fictitious thing here. All right. So what about, all right, this is an interesting one. Lucas mentioned a 50-acre farm to yourself or 10-acre wood patch in the suburbs by yourself. You're talking about the big deer by your house.
I'd say the right 10 is better than the wrong 50.
Yeah. With some of the consulting that you've done over the years, how often do you see large farms versus small farms? And like you said, the right 10 versus the wrong 50. Mm-hmm. How often do you see some of these clients where maybe they have an 80-acre tract and unfortunately like really only 20 or 30 of it's good?
Quite a bit because most of our clients are blue collar guys. They don't have millions of dollars to spend on a farm. So they're buying something that's, got issues, to put it in a different way. But it's kind of unfortunate because there's so many variables. You can have a perfect place that has terrible neighbors, or you can have a kind of mediocre farm that doesn't have any cover around for miles. I mean, it's just, there's too many variables, but yeah, you see it all the time.
What I always ask this too with just people that see a lot of farms, what do you think is usually the lowest hole in the bucket that needs to be fixed?
Cover.
It's cover typically.
Sure.
How does one go about adding more cover? Obviously using a chainsaw is one.
Chainsaw, cut cut. Can't cut enough.
Really? What about, this is another question too. That's we're putting you through the ringer here. I apologize.
That's all right.
What about like honeysuckle, autumn olive? There's a lot of varying opinions on that. Some people say get rid of all the honeysuckle and get natives in there, and some people say honeysuckle's good. It's good cover.
Yeah.
What is your opinion? I have my own thought on it, but I want to hear yours.
Yeah, the invasives, unfortunately, are good cover. Again, this goes back to the majority of people are busy people. They've got families, jobs, like we talked about. Your time could be better spent in other places. It could take you a lifetime to eradicate some of these honeysuckle patches.
Oh yeah,
we just did some pushes last week in the suburbs of Pittsburgh, and it's just square miles after square miles of. If you have a property like that full of honeysuckle, that's all you're going to be doing. You're not going to be doing anything else on your property. So it's tough. I think you leave it alone where it doesn't matter, and remove it where you're trying to make changes or trying to make your property better.
I have some honeysuckle at my house. This is my strategy. I don't have a ton of it. I have a couple pockets that it's pretty thick to establish new native cover elsewhere. And once that takes root and holding, to go in and then get rid of the honeysuckle and then let, natural, natives pop up after that.
It's a great plan.
That's the plan. It's a multi-year approach, but the thought process, if I did take out the honeysuckle, my farm, it would have zero cover.
Right.
And so I don't want to do that.
Absolutely not.
But yeah, it's interesting because you see people have so many different opinions on this. And I don't know if there is a right answer to your point that it's probably likely situational.
Yeah. I mean, we'd all like to see it all gone immediately, but it's just not reality.
Yeah.
And we have to deal in reality. So you do what you can.
That's all you can do. Yeah. Let's see. We have another one. What are you using? This is speaking of just access for grasses. Miscanthus is one that's discussed a lot. Obviously, switchgrasses are used a lot. Egyptian wheat. What are your opinions on those different options?
I've used Egyptian wheat for a lot of years. I like it a lot. It takes a little bit of fertilizer if you want a really tall, thick stand. But I'm comfortable with that because it's an annual plant that you plant every year. It's not difficult. It's a small seed. You could just spray. You don't even have to till. You can do a spray and throw and fertilize, and you'll have a great screen. You don't have to worry about something becoming invasive. I mean, obviously Egyptian wheat is not. Yeah. It's a non-native, but it's not been shown to be invasive. I've used Miscanthus. I think it's great, but I'm kind of on the fence to recommend it to other people because we haven't really seen it on the habitat stage for very long. I think it's been in this country for a while, but the jury's kind of out. Like they did the same thing with those calorie pears that they pushed for landscaping. You ride through the suburbs of Pittsburgh, they're everywhere. I mean, they are taking over. They'll grow anywhere. Old strip mines where nothing's growing. Yeah, those things are growing in thick. So I hesitate to tell anybody to plant something like Miscanthus, but it's been proven not to be invasive and it can be controlled fairly regularly. Switchgrass, there's enough native switchgrasses options that you can plant. They have obviously been no problem. They hold up well. I just caution people not to plant it too thick because a lot of times you'll see stands of switchgrass that are even difficult to walk through. Even for birds to get around through. So yeah, just watch your seeding rates and it's a good option.
Do you use Egyptian wheat in Pennsylvania as well? Does it hold up for the winters?
Yeah. It holds up through hunting season.
Okay.
Let me leave it at that because a lot of people are like, well, that stuff's falling down. Well, I don't care if it falls down in February. I don't.
Yeah.
Some people are like, well, I want the deer to feel safe here the entire year. Okay. If that's your goals, then don't use it.
Yeah.
Use something else.
That's a phrase that should be said more often. If it doesn't fit your goals, do something else. Right. I like that. Okay, so obviously you shot a ton of does this past year, and this is another semi-debated is shooting does versus early season, late season. When do you typically, best case scenario, time to shoot does?
Late season's good. If you're targeting mature bucks in your areas, I mean, you never know where they're lurking around. The time that you let an arrow go on a doe throughout the season, there could be a buck standing 50 yards away, and then he picks you out from moving and shooting that doe. So I would prefer to shoot them late. I've shot them early a few times, but if I have my choice, like we'll go out late season and try to shoot as many as we can, because you're killing a couple of birds with one stone. You know, a lot of them are pregnant at that point, so they're obviously not going to be able to have any more once we get rid of them. So it's kind of, you know, late season. I would prefer to do it.
Okay, let's see. What is your thoughts? This is something that has become more obvious when we've traveled through Iowa and just controlling does, and that in a lot of those areas in Iowa, it seems to be a lot of the serious land managers very serious about controlling doe numbers. What have you seen, or what's your opinions on that? Because that's almost on the forefront of their minds for the most part.
Yeah, I think some places that have a super rigorous program, some people in the Midwest might be doing. I know Texas is really good at deer management when it comes to trigger management for does, but it's a tough thing because, you know, it's like a mature buck. If you shoot a mature buck, another one's going to move in because there's a reason why that mature buck was there. Same with does. If you shoot does because you have too many because your habitat's fantastic, sometimes you're just going to keep that vacuum going nonstop. So that's a tough one because a lot of people, they go out and sit for maybe one day a week. So you're getting their observation and they're saying, well, I've got this and I've got that, but you don't know what's happening the other 6 days of the week. So you're kind of, Al likes to say, people like to throw out observations without quantifying them with facts. And I think that happens a lot where people are kind of trying to manage on just a subjective reasoning that they see and not really what's happening, if that makes sense. So it's a tough thing.
Yeah. Do you think it's easier though for people to do that now with trail cameras to quantify and
it definitely helps. And in some places we've had clients that have been successful by shooting more does and by watching their browse pressure go way down.
Yeah.
Their woods don't look like a bulldozer went through because there's not as many deer eating it. So there are ways to quantify that. But I think what happens is a lot of people aren't putting that much effort into finding out exactly what's going on. They don't put exclusion cages in their food
That's
plots.
always fascinating to me.
Absolutely. Some people will get clients that'll say, I planted this and nothing grew.
Yeah.
Well, how do you know nothing grew? I've seen deer eat an entire field that size.
Yeah.
And they'll put an exclusion cage out and they're like, oh, that's what it's supposed to look like. Yes.
Yeah. Just shows how much they eat.
Sure.
It's really crazy. Most of this has been kind of geared towards Pennsylvania. What do you think, what's one thing that Pennsylvania could do that would make it a top tier state? Because there's some really big deer getting killed out of Pennsylvania.
Yeah. Like I said, the antler point restriction is kind of a double-edged sword. It's helped a lot, but it's also hurt because guys are like, well, there's a buck with 4 points on one side.
He's legal.
And I'm going to shoot it. And that might be a 2-year-old. And I don't think that's good personally, but also it's that person's tag. So if they want to shoot it, it's legal. I'm happy for them. Do what you want. But I think they could fine tune that a little bit, but that's also a tight rope walk. You know, there's so many people that they don't care about antlers. They just want to go and shoot a deer. And I'm all for that. You know, if that makes you happy, shoot what you want. But I think that can be fine-tuned a little better. They've gotten better with the doe tags over the years. It used to be county specific, and now they've come up with these management units, which is, I think, helped. But overall, I think the Game Commission does a very good job. They get a lot of flack from people in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
But
I think they're doing.
No, it's absolutely not an easy job.
My opinion on it is, this is in a perfect world to make it a better, and I have air quotes, it'd probably have a lower hunter density.
Oh yeah,
it's literally how it would,
if that could be controlled. Yeah,
yeah. I think, that would probably be it.
Yeah.
What about, we always talk about different guys that come from like a Michigan or Pennsylvania and they travel out of state. Do you feel that you have some sort of edge than people that, I mean, I grew up in Illinois. That's pretty much all I've ever hunted. I think I would really struggle out here. So do you feel when you go to the Midwest, is it easier, harder, the same, different?
Different's a good word. I hear people say that a lot about Michigan and PA hunters being bad. That's individuals. I mean, there's
a percentage of.
Yeah, there's probably some guys that are really good hunters that can kill. Because let's face it, it's tough to shoot a mature buck in those states, no doubt about it. So if you're consistently doing that, definitely you're going to take those skills with you and be a better hunter somewhere else where it's quote unquote easier. But I don't buy into that as a generality that we're better hunters.
Okay, that's fair. No, I anything else here, guys? I think, like I said, I told you, I should have put more planning. I joked about this. It's a bad joke now because I've said it so many times. But with your law enforcement degree, I was going to pretend to interrogate you. But this is basically what it was. It was a quick interrogation.
Sure.
Really appreciate it. And I would say take a chance to share anything that you want, anything that you have going on, and where people can find you.
Yeah. So like I said at the beginning, with the Habitat podcast, we've got, I think we're 220 episodes in. Over 4 or 5 years. So anywhere you get podcasts, you can find us. We got a website, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Just published our 200th video on YouTube. So lots of stuff there. Not just Habitat, mostly Habitat, but there's some hunting videos. We do some recipes in the kitchen, different interviews, product reviews. So yeah, just Google Habitat Podcast. That'll take you anywhere you want to go to see what we're doing.
Awesome. Appreciate it, Brian. It's always good to catch up. It was good to see you at the show. And just want to say thanks again.
All right. Thanks for having me.